In the name of Christ, who calls us and feeds us. Amen.
Amen.
Well, you could say that this is a misnamed story. We typically say this is the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. But for one thing, it was more than 5,000, right? It's 5,000 men, plus women and children. Okay. So, I'm going to guess that it wasn't literally 5,000 men. They probably didn't have an usher there counting like we do here. So, let's say it was 9. It was probably something like that. The feeding of the 9,000. And then, it said, we think of it as Jesus feeds the 9,000. But in fact, he had the disciples do it. He literally said to them, "You give them something to eat." In a way, this is a story about facing our own feelings of overwhelm and powerlessness before needs that seem limitless. How many times have we felt like we've just come to the end of our rope and we have no more energy? Think how these people must have felt. Jesus and the disciples were going away to a lonely place to rest. That's what their mission was at the beginning of this story. They were trying to get away from it all. They were escaping, for pity's sake, the crowds. And no sooner do they arrive at their destination than they discover everybody figured it out and met them there. So this deserted place is now a place filled with thousands of people. And not just people who want to sit and politely listen. These are people with great needs. The gospel tells us Jesus spent the day healing. Well, that's hard work. And the disciples were in the midst of it, wading into it with him, with all of these folks and their deep and important family and health concerns. And you can just imagine by the end of the day, these folks that were already tired before the day started, after a long day in the heat with 9,000 of their best friends, they'd had it. They'd had it. And the crowd, and you know what happens with angry, hungry crowds. And the disciples say, "Jesus, you better tell these people to leave, because if they stay any longer, they're going to pass the cranky threshold and we're going to have a big problem." When we look at global need, it is so easy to feel overwhelmed. I think it's so easy, we've forgotten Haiti. It was just a year ago. But since then, there was the tsunami in Japan, and now we have a famine in Somalia. The world is full of hungry people, and we'd really like to just put it out of our minds. It is annoying for Jesus to say, "You give them something to eat." But that's what Jesus says. You give them something to eat. And like the disciples, we feel panicked. Like what does the little we have amount to meet that need? I hear a lot people saying that the church should take care of its own, that we should take care of our people here, and we should take care of our own community, and that's good enough. And I agree with that in the sense that we should take care of our own community. We should be supporting Community House. We should be supporting the emergency support shelter. We should be supporting all these excellent local community-based ministries. But the feeding of the 5,000 or the feeding of the 9,000 or however you want to count it is a story about abundance. And it is a story about belonging to one another. It wasn't a matter of the disciples sorting out among themselves. 5 loaves and 2 fish is not much among 12. And they could have said, well, we need to take care of ourselves first. Or I suppose they could have said, well, ourselves and anybody who's related to us, come over here. A little, We come to this communion table and we do it together. We don't come one at a time. And sometimes we do. Liturgically, that works better, and we make a line and come one at a time. But normally, we all line up and get fed together, and the symbolism in that is that we're in this together. We don't choose our companions. And it's true. It's basically mostly Episcopalians from Longview coming to this table. But reality is, anyone is welcome to come in those doors and come to that table. That is the truth. And this symbolic table is a table that goes around the whole world, throughout time, throughout space. Christ's table is for everyone. When Jesus says you give them something to eat, he means everyone. Everyone. It is a sacramental truth. So we have to reframe somehow. When we look at our little resources and the needs of the world, we have to find a way to face that, don't we? We have to find a way to have hope. And I think about that. Instead of thinking about how can I possibly meet all of this need, perhaps the strategy is, as Jesus suggests, take inventory of what I have and just make a start. Just make a start. The gospel doesn't explain how it happened. Just said, Jesus gave thanks for what they had, and they made a start. And when they were done, there were leftovers. I think about what we do here that is so amazing to me. Think about our celebration concerts. What do we do that raises thousands of dollars to help community agencies at St. Stephen? What do? We open the doors. We do a little bit of advertising. I mean, Gary does a certain amount of coordinating. And thousands of dollars. Some wonderful musician just comes and some sound goes into the air. And we send $1,000 to Community House. And people have fun and are enriched by the music. Or I think about this garage sale. A few weeks ago, Jan Farley was standing here saying, I really hope you all have something else in your garages. Big mistake. Yeah, I'd never say that again. And kind of hoping she'd get enough volunteers. And we come here today, and all that's left are a few bags. I mean, this enormous sale takes place. All these people have this huge time. We make over $5,000, and people are enriched, and all of these cool things. I keep hearing stories about the cool things, about how Karen Rogers arranged for my dishes to go to somebody who would love them. About the musician who bought the violin, the teenage musician who got the violin, and it was a good instrument, and it will be meaningful for her. About these things that are going on to make other people's lives richer, that have been repurposed and given new meaning and new life. And in the meantime, $5,000 raised for our church. But even more, what happened to us as we were doing this? I heard a lot of laughter and fellowship and camaraderie, and yeah, people are tired. The disciples were tired that day too. But thousands of people were ministered to and fed. And the joy of that feeds us. changes us, creates community in us. We are different. When we look at what resources we have, and we put them out there, and we risk in love, that's what stewardship is about. It's about trusting God to multiply the loaves. That's not in our power. What's in our power is to see what we've got and to try and make use of it. The bishop asked us to give 10 cents a day during Easter, to set aside 10 cents a day for an orphanage in Haiti. And now that orphanage has a source of clean water that is also a source of income. The people in the village come and use that water source, and they pay a very small fee for it, but what they pay for that water helps to provide food for the children who live in the orphanage, which is as it should be. So our little 10 cents, I mean, you can't even buy. Well, the other day I was in the store and I gave the clerk $19 for an $18.10 thing, and she said, "Oh, don't worry about the 10 cents, I've got that." You know, we used to do that with pennies, now we do it with a dime. 10 cents a day. And orphan children in Haiti with disabilities are fed every day and have clean water, and their lives are more sustainable. And the village is blessed because they have clean water. It's a loaves and fishes story. Rachel Beckwith, have you heard about her? Young girl in Seattle, 8 years old. Her birthday's on its way. Her parents, she and her parents belonged to a very mission-minded church that had been active in Africa, providing clean water in a village. And it was her desire for her 9th birthday to forego gifts and other things and instead raise $300. It was her goal to raise $300 so that she could contribute to clean water for Africa. Tragically, her car was hit by a semi, and of the 12 cars that were involved in the accident, she was the only fatality. And her birthday gathering had not been fully successful. I think she'd only raised like $282 or something like that. A little disappointing. She was hoping for the 300. It's now 200,000. Much of that raised in increments of $9. Loaves and fishes. Little gestures of generosity and hope that feed on one another and connect us to one another and transform us. What must it have been like on that day when the disciples finished feeding those folks? Of course the people were fed, and that was wonderful. But something else happened too. The disciples were fed. They were fed in a way that changed them forever. This story is told in every gospel. Twice in one of them. Because it is a life-changing story. It is the pattern of Jesus' call to us to look at what we've got, to give thanks for what we have, to be generous with what we have, and then to trust God to multiply the rest, and in doing so, learn that act not only of generosity, but of trust and gratitude and hope and joy, and know that we are connected to one another around the world, and to our brothers and sisters who share this call to serve and feed. What happens to us when we open ourselves up to God's abundance and work in us is blessing and joy. Amen.